You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about monster toys. Here we go. All right, folks, welcome back to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-hosts Pete Charbonneau. And Pete, we just can't quit monsters, can we? The cryptids, the kaijus, they sunk in their teeth and they just won't let go.
At what point do we change the name of the podcast to Monsters to Monsters?
I think at this point, you're just echoing the thoughts of at least 51% of the audience. 49% are getting exactly what they thought. The other 51% wonder why they keep hitting play and if they should unsubscribe. To which I would say,
when are these guys going to start talking about the Smurfs?
Booga, booga! I told you I'd have the scariest costume, but would you believe me?
Say, that's no monster, it's Brady!
You're right, Hefty.
Your costume, it is très beau!
This isn't a costume. I'm a real monster.
well, we're not letting go of Monster Mania just yet. And in our typical attempt to squeeze all the toothpaste out of the tube, we're going to take another angle at monsters. This time around, Pete, we're going to talk about something that I don't know if you can ever grow too old for toys.
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. They got the best for so much less. You really flip your lid.
From bike to train to video games, it's the biggest toy store there is.
Gee whiz!
I don't want to grow up, 'cause baby, if I did, I couldn't be a Toys R Us kid. More games, more toys. Oh boy,
I want to be a Toys R Us kid.
I think we're probably at a place now where our love for toys is a little different, probably equal parts nostalgic and probably maybe even, and I'm just probably speaking for myself here, more collectible than it was in our early days with better knees and maybe less gray hairs.
I think that's probably accurate. Yes, you're more of the collector than I am. I find myself, it's enough for me to just do the Google search and come across stuff that I used to own as a kid and be like, oh, that's really cool. You and I had active imaginations. We still do, I'd like to think. So I think growing up, I had a very active play imagination, and that revolved around, tons of toys that, I could keep myself busy for hours on end creating worlds, using toys, action figures. When I got a little bit older, you'd start doing the, pre-cosplay stuff of running into the woods across the street from my house to play Star Wars or Army Men or Planet of the Apes or something like that, where, you would find a stick that looked somewhat like a gun, and that would be your blaster. If you could not, acquire one of the, Kenner Stormtrooper or Han Solo blasters, which I did eventually have, but sometimes in a pinch, you got to use a stick. Sticks work.
That first year, people had to use cardboard because they weren't able to get their
That's right.
Chewbacca or Han Solo toys that first year because they just weren't ready.
Yeah, you just have that cardboard stand that you, I guess, would gaze longingly at to be like, one day.
In the meantime, I just have corrugated paper to get me through the holiday season. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Star Wars figures. R2-D2. Chewbacca, Luke, and Princess Leia. They're the Star Wars Early Bird set of figures. These action figures are not yet available, but this Star Wars Early Bird certificate package is in stores. With this colorful Star Wars picture display stand and certificate to send in to get a set of figures by mail. They'll be sent to you at home between February 1st and June 1st. The Star Wars Early Bird certificate package, new from Kenner.
You mentioned Star Wars, and folks, spoiler alert, Star Wars will come up again later. Early toys, soldiers, dinosaurs. I know you've talked about before those little small tin soldiers that you ordered in a mail-away thing just to be surprised that they were so microscopic that maybe, Pete, the advertisement was not truthful.
Yeah, the Foot Locker plastic toy soldiers. Anyone that grew up in the 70s and 80s, opened up a comic book, probably remembers or saw that ad. I think they had one for like the Foreign Legion as well, or Legionnaires. There was like different versions. And I begged my mom to order that. It was super cheap. And I was too young to understand, like, maybe there's a correlation to the price and what I was going to be getting. Because I'm thinking, you envision Foot Locker, you're thinking, oh, wow, this thing is going to be a big crate full of awesome army men and tanks and planes. And yep, I was massively disappointed when that arrived in the mail.
Well, you mentioned Foot Locker too. I think part of the fun, especially with our very active imaginations, everyone, and I know Alan, hashtag Stranger Friend, Fan2Fan All-Star, has talked about how he had the extra dinged up pasta pot that his mom gave him, and that became his storage container for his crotchless and thumbless G.I. Joes. And I think each of us had either that extra shoebox, if you were so lucky, the Darth Vader
I had Darth Vader carrying case. Yep.
Oh boy. I mean, that's when you're fancy.
That's a carry-on luggage item when you're lucky enough to travel by plane.
Bet you know what this is. It's the Darth Vader collector's case from the Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back collection. Inside, it's got room for your favorite Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back action figures. They fit? Yeah. There's new Dengar, AT-AT Driver, Rebel Commander, Leia, and 2-1B. You can hold up to 31 action figures, each sold separately, and you can take them with you. Darth Vader collector's case. Action figures, each sold separately, from Kenner.
And the good thing about the Foot Locker or sausage pan or whatever you decided to put your toys in, I'm going to guess, Pete, that at some point in that esteemed place where you put your toys, there was a monster. And folks, that is what we call a transition, because if you saw the title and you hit play, you know that we're talking monster toys. So we have a collection, somewhat random, certainly nostalgic, of certain toys. And I thought probably a good place to start were in the late 50s into the 60s. We had the Aurora Monster model kits. And from what I saw, again, thanks to ye olde Google search, they're widely considered the first major monster toy line. Although, to be fair, I think neither of us would categorize model kits as toys. But when you're getting something that's licensed, the Wolfman and Frankenstein and Dracula, I'm going to spot them and say, fair enough. Thank you, Aurora Plastics Company, for giving us monster toys.
Hi, I'm Spencer Brewer, and over my lifetime, I've been known pretty much as a composer, pianist, producer, promoter. But something that very few people know about is I have had a passion and a love for old monster models from the 1960s. So what happened was if you were a young guy, usually boys, that was born at a certain time in the 50s, and then this company named Aurora made these monster models. And what they were basically were replications of the old Universal monster movies. I was a huge fan. I could not get enough of these things. I had my paper route, I'd mow lawns, I worked for my dad and my dad's friends. I'd go down, ride my bike to the local Rexall Drug and buy a monster model for $1. Come home, go up to my room and paint all the stuff and glue it all together, and I was in my fantasy world. And what these things are, they're like the Creature of the Black Lagoon. You had up here Wolfman, King Kong, Dracula, you had Superman, the Phantom of the Opera. I mean, these things were fun, and I would fantasize up in my room while I was sitting here painting and making these things.
Yeah, what I want to know is, did they produce an Invisible Man, which was just an empty box? I don't know that. I'm guessing that they probably did not do that, but maybe they did.
And I think with some of these that I've seen, especially at different conventions for folks that have kind of kept the boxes especially, and they do have that amazing artwork to them that I think in some...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the artwork's fantastic. Yeah.
Amazing. I think in my youths, I may have put together a few fighter plane model kits when I was in my I want to be a fighter pilot type phase. Mm-hmm. And maybe a few dinosaur model kits from the, hey, we're going to go to the museum and I can't buy something cool, but my parents gave me money to buy something educational. So you buy a dinosaur model kit and you try to put it together. Never looks amazing as the watercolor picture with the vista on the front. And I think with a lot of these Aurora model kits, again, the I think the work that I've seen folks do of assembling them and painting them, a far cry from those from the amazing artwork that they have. But again, if you're in the horror fandom and you want to get something for your kid who loves monsters, this is a great, legitimately monster thing to get, especially at a time when, again, you kind of go down this nostalgia aisle and you see these toys, those little plastic figures you were talking about, the little soldiers. You kind of see things that are made out of tin, little wind-up dragons and dinosaurs, and feels more like Halloween novelties and tchotchkes, like devils and things like that, not legitimate creatures from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And obviously this is before our time, so I'm not sure the thinking in terms of like the production and marketing of these things, but I feel like certainly with those Aurora models were less about something that you would play with and more would just be like a display piece that you'd have in your room. What those remind me of and what my connection to those are, because I did not have any of those growing up. I had a brief spell where I got into getting like fighter plane models that I would put together. Assembling the model I was okay at, but the paint I was horrible at. And that's where, like, to your point, like once I started painting the thing, I quickly lost interest because I'm like, this is looking nothing like what's on the box. I think I'm just, and there's no going back at that time. Like,
yes.
Can I get a do-over here? Control Alt Delete. What can I do here? But yeah, my connection, oddly enough, was with the TV movie Salem's Lot, because the character Mark has not those exact figures. They were smaller scale, but he had that diorama that he was putting together.
If you thought you could never be frightened by a television movie, watch what happens to the citizens of Salem's Lot. Is something evil killing the people in Salem's Lot, or are they killing each other?
Run! No!
A terrifying 3-hour special movie presentation Tuesday. Watch it with someone you trust. This is CBS.
When I saw that as a younger person, I related to Mark on a number of levels because he was kind of a shy kid. I was a shy kid. There was like that, connection watching that movie, and I just always remember, when he like breaks off the cross in the graveyard to repel one of the Glick boys away from the window. Just that's like seared into my memory. So that's kind of where my brain goes when I think of the Aurora Monster kits.
What's wrong with Dracula? He's losing his monster power. So is Frankenstein. Quick, into the Monsterizer.
You can activate the Monsterizer, batteries not included, and imagine you're restoring monster power to Frankenstein. Figures sold separately. You crank him into the chamber. It closes automatically.
Activate the Monsterizer. I feel like a new monster.
The Monsterizer comes complete as shown. Frankenstein and Dracula figures are sold separately. New from Remco.
Those early Remco Universal Monster toys, I feel like by the time I really started getting into, say, G.I. Joe or Transformers, the staples of the 80s, a lot of those Remco Dracula figures had enough paint rubbed off of them that they were still parts of like the play experience. You could still have Frankenstein face off against Snake Eyes, but you could tell like Frankenstein had been through some shit. There was a lot of playing and chewing and maybe potentially you're playing catch with your dog. Oh man, like these figures have seen better days, but still at a time when we're growing up with Universal Monsters already being quite a few decades older than we are, you could still see Frankenstein on a Valentine. You could still see the Mummy on a thermos.
I have to imagine that when these Aurora kits started coming out in the late 50s, early 60s, that was probably a direct result of that Universal Monsters TV package, because otherwise it would be an odd choice to go with like, oh, let's go with Universal Monsters as these model kits. But as you've pointed out many times, they packaged all the Universal Monsters in, and so they could run on TV stations all across the country, and it provided a nice little renaissance for those movies from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And that kind of hit right around this time. So I think just timing wise, this is why you saw these particular kits kind of take off in that time period.
That makes a lot of sense because you figure, yeah, when those packages are going out, you're getting to a point where we're seeing more TV stations come up across the U.S. like we saw in the 80s during the heydays of like the mom and pop video stores. That's when we saw Wizard Video and Vestron and all these companies make direct to VHS movies. Why? Well, because the shelves need to be filled. And if Paramount and Fox are not making enough movies, well, Charles Band will happily make you a few and put them on your shelf and have them available for rental. Same with these stations that now find themselves with 24 hours a day to program. And yeah, maybe you can throw in a Godzilla marathon. All right, well, what do? Well, at midnight, you throw on The Mummy, or you throw on House of Frankenstein, or Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman. Why? Well, that's 2 hours. You can sell a few ads to some used cars, sales lots around you. And next thing you know, you have a channel that you and I would watch. And that's how we would get some of these Universal monsters. Makes sense. And like you said, that resurgence, Aurora says, hey, let's take advantage of this and jump on the bandwagon. Maybe we can sell a few of these.
Yeah. The whole next generation that like rediscovered those Universal monsters were probably primed and ripe for, the target demo.
For sure. They were all the marks from Salem's Lot that were probably buying Famous Monsters of Filmland or Fangoria, digesting all of this stuff. And man, like, of course, there's a space on your shelf that's just perfect for a Mummy or a model figure.
Right next to that fourth place bowling league trophy.
That's right.
And now you can build your own King Kong with these challenging King Kong model kits. You need no glue, no special tools. Just snap together and paint it, and you have a realistic model of Kong fighting the giant snake. Or for a real challenge, build King Kong on top of the Twin Towers. When you're finished, they make a great addition to any kid's room.
And luckily for all those kids, all those boys and girls from the 60s that were putting together their monster models, they had a few more options than just Aurora, Pete. I saw that there were also these things called Weirdos monster kits, these sort of grotesque, cartoonish monster hot rod hybrids. And even though he wasn't part of this specific line, Ratfink is probably the most iconic character in that sort of monster meets counterculture hot rod aesthetic of the 60s and the 70s. Speaking of the 70s, there were also Mego monster action figures, these 8-inch action figures that were available for big lines like Planet of the Apes and Marvel and DC superheroes, Star Trek, and they also featured some classic monsters like the Mummy and the Wolfman with the flocked hair and the cloth outfits. Definitely made the monsters more playable compared to those static model kits.
It's Kenner's new Stretch Monster.
Look out, Stretch Armstrong! Stretch Monster, stop you! Loose! This will stop Stretch Monster! No, it won't! He's freeing himself! We'll meet again, Shorty!
Stretch Monster, new from Kenner. Stretch Armstrong, sold separately.
Folks may remember Stretch Armstrong, this hit in the 1970s toy scene that was this gel-filled, endlessly elastic hero, really more of a novelty, I think, than what we consider a traditional toy. But I'm going to mention the Stretch Monster. Took the same kind of rubbery concept, except, it literally gave it some teeth. It was grotesque, had a bunch of fangs, just like Stretch Armstrong, a stretchable body. So you could take this toy, take this monster, and do your own little stretch torture test.
It's the battle of the mini-monsters, introducing Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, and Creature from the Black Lagoon.
The monsters with glow-in-the-dark features.
Frankenstein is in a foul temper. Dracula flies in, fangs bared. Creature surfaces, dripping with rage. Phantom shows his fiendish face. I can't look! Is he ugly? The monster battle rages on. It's a howl.
The monsters with glow-in-the-dark features, each sold separately from Rancor.
There's another spot on the shelf, Pete, that may have been taken up by a piece of injected molten plastic in the shape of a creature or monster.
Doesn't that sound delicious?
It does. We're going to move forward to the 70s to 80s. And for folks that maybe are not aware, Pete and I grew up at a time when injection mold souvenir machines were maybe ubiquitous is going too far. But again, You go to a museum for a field trip for school, I remember them being there. And in that case, you could get this figure where you throw in a few cents, and then next thing you know, you get dropped out of a slot this warm, hollow plastic figure. It was warm because it had literally been injected molded plastic.
At Universal Studios, you can find these really neat Mold-A-Rama machines. These date back to the 1960s. The way they work is you put in a few dollars, the mold closes and injects with a hot plastic. After just a couple minutes, you have a really unique souvenir. This one's actually the creature from the Black Lagoon. The mold opens up, the arm pushes it out. If you've done one of these, you know you have to hold it upside down as soon as you pull it out so that the plastic has the chance to cool in all the right spots.
And it had the smell of plastic. You get a dinosaur, a gorilla, a creature. If you were lucky, you might get like an actual like licensed Universal Monster or a cheap knockoff unlicensed version of them, or it's not the creature, it's not the gill man, but it's some sort of frogman, amphibian type looking creature. And at that point, it was enough because yes, it wasn't posable and it wasn't articulated, but you got to ride home with a version of the creature of the Black Lagoon in hot plastic that seared your hands and left memories and scars.
Yeah, it was kind of like the souvenir penny, machines of the time. Like, now you go into some museums, like, oh, drop in a penny. Not like people carry pennies around anymore either. So even I'm dating myself with that reference, but some people hopefully will get it. I for sure had to have had at least one of these things growing up. I can't for the life of me remember which one, but doing trips to like the Smithsonian in DC and the Air and Space Museum, I would be shocked if they did not have one of those, like, what do they call it? Like the Mold-A-Rama machine.
Mold-A-Rama, that's right.
Again, another interesting piece of history just because of how they were made, like right in front of you, like the liquid hot plastic is like injected into two die-cast metal molds that were like each half of the piece. And then they would be pressed together, fused into the plastic souvenir / toy that would get, like you said, you would get like pushed out into the slot for your waiting hands to grab and run off with. And I don't remember how long those things lasted for. I mean, it's plastic. It wasn't like super cheap, but like you said, it was hollow. So I feel like those things probably didn't take too much damage before they were cast into the garbage.
Or your dog's chew toy bin. I think
that thing would probably have been mauled by many, many a pet.
That is true.
Now, for every kid who has ever seen a science fiction movie, thrilled to the amazing strength of an out-of-this-world movie monster, comes Great Garloo by Marx. Garloo the mighty. Garloo the untamed. Garloo the terrible. Who can stop him? Who can control this monstrous creature? You can, kids, because Great Garloo by Marx is yours to command. With these battery-operated controls, you can make Garloo go, stop, bend, pick up, turn. Yes, Great Garloo, almost 2 feet tall, will be your faithful servant. You name it, you're the boss. Bring out-of-this-world excitement into your house, kids. Own the most fantastic toy of all. Great Garloo by Marx.
All right, we're going to go to another toy that's a piece of history. I've heard of the Great Garloo.
I had not.
You had not. Okay, fair enough. It's an early example, I think, of combining monsters because it's essentially like a giant atomic age type creature. We've talked about like atomic age movies, them, Tarantula, Black Scorpion, all of this stuff is coming out in like the mid to late 50s. We have kaijus that are coming up with Godzilla and Rodan in the 50s as well. The Great Garloo looks like something that would have been in like a Ray Harryhausen movie.
Yeah.
The aesthetic of like the creature of it all, the futuristic part of this, and I'm using that in podcast quotations here, is the fact that there was a mechanical component to it because it was remote controlled and it had a remote that you could use to have it walk around. Again, just kind of a cool reflection of like the 50s monster craze and again, the influence of the atomic age to toys.
Yeah, when you sent me the link to the commercial, I was looking at it and like I paused it as its like face comes out of, the darkness. I'm like, this thing looks like the little killer baby from It Lives.
Oh, yes, it does. Oh, my God.
I feel like that might have been in Larry Cohen's subconscious, possibly.
Motorized monsters, fiendishly fun. And you make them walk with your motorized monster maker. You pour the colored plastics for OG Ogre. With extra kits, you make hairy, or bald. You choose the ears for Galaxon, the horns for Willy Weirdwolf. Motorized monsters. Design them, make them, get them.
Another toy from the 60s, the Topper Monster Maker, aka the Bags and Things. And I sent this to you because I thought this was a good example of DIY build a creature idea. Like when I think of Mr. Potato Head and how you can take something and break it apart, kind of use it as like a skeleton, but you could technically put the eyes where the arms would go. And it's like, let your imagination run wild. The Topper Monster Maker seemed to be a way to have like imaginative play where you could bring in the creativity. But again, the fact that it was monsters, there was some cool design work. I'm surprised that they have not made a comeback.
Yeah, there seemed to be quite a bit of variety to them, which was definitely very cool. I feel like the process, because this was like more hands-on, like as the commercial has the kids like squeezing the liquids. I have to feel like this toy would have violated 60 to 70 EPA emissions regulations today, would probably not make it to market for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that kids would be probably drinking whatever shit was, and that would not end well for them. But in the 60s, it was all fair game. I guess the idea was that kids were more responsible. I don't know. I have to feel like any child would take a look at some of that stuff and be like, look at this blue liquid. I think I should drink this.
And if they had enough damage to their intestines, Pete, they might have to get surgery and they would have to be rebuilt. And you know where I'm going with this, Pete, because if you flash forward to the 1970s and you were home after school or during the summer, you might see yourself as Steve Austin. The $6 Million Man is played by the amazing Lee Majors. And in one of those episodes, Pete, he may have run into a cryptid, which we know.
It was more than one episode, Bernie.
Oh, it was more than one episode because our man, Steve Austin, faced off against Bigfoot.
He did indeed.
It's bionic Bigfoot, new from Kenner. And the $6 Million Man.
Look out, Steve! You'll never be Bigfoot. Oh, yeah, this will stop. Synchronic circuit! Give up, Bigfoot! Bigfoot never gives up.
Bionic Bigfoot, new from Kenner. $6 Million Man sold separately.
Bigfoot was in at least 2, maybe 3 episodes and played by 2 very famous people. One, Andre the Giant, played Bigfoot on one episode, and I think the other 2, he was played by Lurch himself, Ted Cassidy. Some very big men donning the Bigfoot suit to take on Colonel Steve Austin, and I was a huge fan of this show. That was right in my wheelhouse. I was the perfect age to just be in love with the whole idea of a bionic man. You run through your yard doing the bionic sounds.
You still think Bigfoot's a hoax? I don't know what to think. My people named him Sasquatch. You call him Bigfoot.
That was hours of entertainment for me. So when they came out with the toy line, my brother and I definitely had the $6 Million Man action figure. We never got the Bigfoot one, much to my eternal dismay. We did have, there was a third, it was called Maskatron, and you could put on different faces. One of them was actually Steve Austin, and the other one might have been Oscar Goldman, because he was an evil cyborg robot creature. We did have that. Did not have the Bigfoot, although when I did see a friend that had the Bigfoot toy, it was less articulate than the $6 Million Man was. Like the elbows and the knees didn't move, so it was just kind of one like the arms would come out straight. So when you did see it in action, you're just kind of like, I thought this was going to be a little bit better, especially compared to the $6 Million Man figure.
Now, when you saw the Bigfoot, did you really even need Steve Austin's bionic eye that he came with his toy to see how non-toyetic Bigfoot was?
I did not need it, but I still used it because there was nothing better than cramming your eyeball up to the back of Steve Austin's plastic head, especially after it had been laying in the dirt in your backyard, and then you got conjunctivitis. That's just childhood rite of passage. So
that's right.
Do it. You had to do it.
Again, we think about the 70s and our affinity for cryptids as we know them now. And I think the 70s had a lot of Bigfoot, a lot of Loch Ness Monster. And I think they kind of became part of the whole pop culture consciousness. And when there's a little bit of science dripped on top of folklore or mythology, all of a sudden, I'm going to listen to Leonard Nimoy's dulcet tones and I'm going to believe him that there is a creature out there and he's running in the woods. And maybe Steve Austin can catch up with him. Maybe he can't. But it's still kind of cool, the fact that a bunch of these kids, not you, other kids did have the Bigfoot figure, lack of posability or otherwise.
Yes, and I hope that they had hundreds of hours of playtime enjoyment with the Bigfoot action figure.
A giant, hairy creature, part ape, part man. Indians call him Sasquatch. They believe he is as gentle as he is powerful and mysterious. He's been seen many times in the rugged mountains and deep woods of the Pacific Northwest. The encounters have not always been peaceful.
All right, we're going to jump to 1979, Pete. And
this is the wild one, folks. This is a
little wild. This is a little wild because there was a little movie called Alien that was released in the 70s. And as we view it now, obviously seminal piece of sci-fi. Some would even argue, if you look at it, it certainly follows a lot of horror movie tropes in the way the xenomorph is stalking the crew on the Nostromos. But the 1979 Alien Kenner toy.
Kenner presents new Alien action figure.
Bayonets flow! Quick, shut the airlock! The alien's locked out now! He got through! Shh! Give up! Alien can't be beat! We'll zap him with the light! Don't, he'll destroy the spaceship! We've lost! Better find another ship! Let's try the kitchen! Another triumph for Alien!
Alien action figure. New from Kenner.
I kind of get it. Kenner secures the Star Wars toy line 1977 before the film is released. And you just have to wonder if the success of Star Wars and the fact that it's sci-fi and it's aliens makes Kenner think, well, screw this. Let's go after some other like high profile sci-fi rights. So let's go ahead and release Alien. And you could almost see how all that would work on a whiteboard until you see this figure.
Yeah, talk about some nightmare fuel. I mean, this thing doesn't exist without Star Wars' success. And someone or a couple of people at Kenner were probably like wish casting to be like, okay, what's another big, sci-fi is big now. So what's the next big sci-fi thing coming out? Oh, there's this movie called Alien. Okay, let's grab the rights to that thing, and we can hopefully, if not make as much money as with Star Wars figures, we'll have another hit on our hands, and it's another moneymaker. Never mind the fact that Alien was rated R, was not for children. And it's wild that this made it into production and was out there. I did not own this toy. I remember going over a friend or a family friend's house that did have it. So I remember playing with it at least one time. And I mean, the toy obviously didn't scare me, but I did not see Alien in the theater. When I think I finally did catch it on cable, it scared the shit out of me. So
1 week from tonight, inside all of us lies a fear of the unknown.
If we break quarantine, we could all die.
We're going in.
I said that we abandoned the ship.
The film that set the standard for horror. Starring Tom Skerritt and Sigourney Weaver. From tonight, Alien. Parental discretion is advised.
It's like the interesting thing when we talk about monster toys. In general, you're not looking to petrify kids. Like you want to have like a fun play experience. So there's probably less monster toys out there than you might think. That's why we're talking about things that include like the model kits, because it's less about like the playtime stuff. But this was definitely for playtime, and it was a large figure too. Like, was this like the 12 or 18 inch tall toy?
I don't know if it was 18, but they were larger, probably in like the 8 to 9 inch range. Like when you think about what a Barbie doll is, that's what the original G.I. Joes were. They were about the same size, comparable. And then at some point, G.I. Joe made the change and they were smaller. And then when Star Wars was released, same thing, smaller figure. And now you can have ships and play sets because the figures are much smaller. And Alien kind of did the opposite, and you brought it up because Star Wars, and I remembered when you mentioned it, had released some figures, namely some of the hero characters, the major characters, Darth Vader, Han Solo, Skywalker, in the kind of like 8 to 9 inch range.
I'm after the Death Star plans.
Kenner's Star Wars large-size action figures sold separately with movable arms and legs. C-3PO, R2-D2, Han Solo and the Stormtrooper.
You'll never find the planned Stormtrooper.
You can push R2-D2's secret button to open his hidden compartment.
Plans are safe and the Stormtrooper's gone. Thanks, Han. I didn't get this medal for nothing.
Large-size Stormtrooper, R2-D2, C-3PO, Han Solo, each sold separately from Kenner.
That's what this was. And to your point, like, it didn't necessarily have all the H.R. Giger-ness of like the xenomorph design. It was kind of like a stripped down, toned down version of it, but it still had like the silhouette of the head, the figure, everything.
I like the skull in the, which, I don't recall seeing all that clearly in the movie, which makes the action figure even freakier.
You see this and you realize decisions were made for what looks to be now like a highly mature horror collectible, but made for a 1979 kid audience that's also playing with Star Wars. So for those that have this and have those memories, I'm sure it didn't scar you. I'm sure it only made you a better, more productive and imaginative person. But I think for every one of those people, Pete, again, you see this commercial and you realize what adult bought this for their kid.
Yeah. I mean, before Return of the Jedi, I would be down for having this alien toy, like taking on my Star Wars figures. Like that would have been like a fun time to be like, oh shit, like we landed on this planet and there's this giant alien creature attacking. So like putting myself back in my, 10-year-old sneakers, it would be, okay, now the Empire and the Rebels are going to have to combine forces to take down the alien. So like there's fun to be had. It's just like the adults in the room maybe made an interesting decision in greenlighting this toy.
That's right. All right. Well, you mentioned Star Wars, and we've got to get to the 1983 release of the Star Wars Rancor monster, also by the good people at Kenner.
The Rancor monster's hungry again. Let's feed him. Don't do it.
Luke Skywalker, Gamorrean Guard, new Rancor Monster and Rancor Keeper action figures, each sold separately.
You'll regret this. Wait till he gets his claws into a Jedi Knight. Whoa, some Jaws. This is my only chance. He's wounded. We better get in there. You'll never get out alive, Gamorrean Guard.
New Rancor Monster, action figures, each sold separately from Kenner's Star Wars Return of the Jedi collection.
When I think of this toy, I think this is probably more representative of like a monster toy. It's a tie-in to like a big franchise. You get this large figure, emphasizes the whole idea of like a playset. You need Luke Skywalker, so you need something small, and then you get the Rancor figure, which is large. Fun will ensue on a Saturday morning after Saturday morning cartoons, because this thing had heft.
It did, and I don't recall. I don't think its fingers were articulated, but it was like molded in a way that you could easily just stick one of your action figures in there. So like the Rancor like grabbed Luke or Leia, or if you wanted to get rid of a couple of your Ewoks, just toss them in there. You'd be toss that right across the room. Watching the commercial for this kind of brought me back to like a nostalgic part of my youth, and I'm curious if you agree with me on this. The way commercials were art directed and set up back then, and granted, I'm obviously not a child anymore, so I'm not watching a lot of toy commercials to do a big compare and contrast, but when you watch the commercial for the Rancor, they've dug a pit and they've used like sticks to kind of create the cage that the Rancor is in. It's like, I remember commercials back then had like this really great suggestive quality to them of like how kids could, model play after. And it was like, they were not like exotic locations, because a lot of times they were in like filmed in someone's backyard, but they would always have like stuff like that was like, hey, look with these kids, they kind of just dug a little pit, and like now it's the Rancor pen, and like you would just take some sticks lying around the yard, and there's your cage to it. And obviously it was art directed and looked like really cool, but I kind of dug the way, and obviously this is all marketing and it's just to get you to buy the stuff, and there's that cynical side of it, but the non-cynical side of me was like, that's really a kind of cool way to kind of spark imagination in kids. And clearly it was designed to spark kids going up to their parents and be like, I gotta have the Rancor monster. Do you see this commercial? Because I can do that in my backyard. But I don't know if commercials are shot or done that way anymore. I'm guessing probably not. Just the way that we consume advertising has changed so much. But talk about just like an interesting point in time of like trying to sell kids on toys. But there is something to that I find, again, the cynical side apart, there's a little bit of charm to that.
Absolutely. And I think I remember many a times playing with G.I. Joes and maybe my Empire figures. And if there was snow on the ground, Pete, like that was the best, because I could essentially recreate the Battle of Hoth, or I could create the same thing that the commercials were kind of giving me permission to do. Like, I want to dig out some hole in the snow. I want to grab the gravel or the pebbles that my mom has used for the garden. And even though it's meant to be decorative, I've got to make a wall, because that's the only way G.I. Joe is going to keep off the evil forces of Cobra. How else could they do it? And then all of a sudden, like you're seeing a Rancor monster in what should be like this cave, and the commercial is basically giving you the blueprint. And you go to kids like you and me, we didn't need much, but I think there's something about that. Like, it's facilitating play. It's letting you know, hey, we're giving you this cool molded piece of plastic, but take it from here, kid. You're going to have a lot of fun with this, and hopefully some nice memories.
Yeah. And usually some like interesting child actors in these commercials that are, some of the lines that they're asked to deliver, like, come and get me, Rancor monster, which is not the voice that I use when I play with my Star Wars figures. I had a very mature voice. I like to feel like I nailed Harrison Ford at the time. That came out way wrong. I meant to say I nailed Harrison Ford's voice at the time.
His people will talk to your people, which will talk to the local police department, Pete. Don't you worry about that.